What's up everybody, Ashen here and welcome back to the channel guys. Today we're going to talk about something that is extremely controversial within the Souls series and the Souls family itself. A game that splits the entire community every time you mention it. A game that some people call it misunderstood masterpiece and the other call it the weakest FromSoftware franchise ever made. Dark Souls 2 sits in a strange place in gaming history, its ambitions, its divisiveness, and years later people are still arguing about whether it deserves its reputation or not. So in this video I'm trying to put everything together. I'm not here to praise it, nor here to break it, nor even to create any form of division even further than that. I'm just here to tear everything down. I want to look at everything, why people love it and why people hate it, where it succeeds and where it fails, and why it still matters today, and why this argument is still so vividly discussed within the Souls family itself. I'm here to talk about Dark Souls 2, its failure, its experiments, or is it truly a misunderstood masterpiece? Dark Souls 2 occupies a strange and an uncomfortable place in the Souls lineage. It is the most criticized entry in the entire series. The one that most often labeled the weakest, the black sheep, the game people feel the need to justify its liking. And yet, it is one of the most ambitious titles FromSoftware has ever released. To understand why Dark Souls 2 is so divisive, you have to look at both sides honestly and objectively. Not just why people defend it, but why so many reject it outright. The criticism begins with expectations. Dark Souls 2 followed one of the most influential games ever made. Dark Souls 1 wasn't just successful, it's redefined the game design completely, from world building and the difficulty in the modern era itself. Players did not want evolution, they wanted refinement. Instead, they got a sequel developed without Miyazaki in the director's chair itself, led by two different creative visions. That alone set the stage for backlashes. One of the most immediate points of contention is the world itself. Lodwyn felt like a cohesive, logical, and interconnected in any way a few games have ever made or tried to do. Every shortcut reinforced the illusion that it was a real decaying place. But on the other hand, Dwayne Lake, by contrast, often feels disjointed, elevator that leads towards an environment that seems physically impossible. Biomass clash with us transition. To critics, this isn't symbolism, it's a broken sense of place. Souls games thrive on spatial storytelling, and Dark Souls 2 often feels like a collection of levels than a unified world. Defenders argue this disorientation is intentional, that Dwayne Lake is a dreamlike land collapsing under the weight of forgotten ages, and theoretically thematical that interpretation should work, or works. The game repeatedly emphasizes decay, repetition, and entropy. Kingdom rises, kingdom falls, and kingdoms are forgotten. Time erodes meaning. Geography itself becomes unrelatable. This reading, this Dwayne Lake incoherence isn't a flaw, it's a message. But intentions does not always equal execution. Even the world's broken logic fits the theme. It still clashes with the design language players were trained to accept. When immersion breaks, symbolism alone may not be enough to repair it. That tension continues in combat. Dark Souls 2 is slower, more methodical, and less forgiving than its siblings. For some players it feels deliberate and weighty. For others it feels unresponsive. Hitboxes, especially at launch, were inconsistent enough to erode trusts. In a franchise built on precision, even occasional moments of visual and mechanical mismatch can be extremely fatal. When a player dies, Souls games rely on the belief that the death was deserved. Dark Souls 2 sometimes struggles to maintain that contract. Enemy placement intensifies this issue. Where other Souls games focus on careful, calculated encounters, Dark Souls 2 often leans into sheer numbers. Ambushes are frequent, enemies argue from a long distance, narrow corridor filled with opponents designed less to test mastery but more to overwhelm. To critics, this feels like an artificial difficulty, challenged through excess than rather design. Yet here too, defenders push back. They argue that Dark Souls 2 discourages reckless aggression and forces players to think about positioning, stamina management and crowd control. It rewards patience over reflex. It demands adaptation. The problem is that this demand is not always communicated clearly, which brings us to one of the most controversial systems into the game itself: adaptability. Tying invisibility frames and item usage speed to a stat was a bold move, but also a deeply opaque one. The game never properly explained how crucial adaptability is, especially to newer players. As a result, many players experience the game as unfair, not because it's inherently hard, but because it withholds its core responsive behind an invisible requirement. What some see as a deep role-playing, others see as a poor onboarding and unnecessary punishment. Boss designs follow the same pattern of extremes. Dark Souls 2 contains some of the finest bosses FromSoftware has ever created. From the Few Knight to Sir Alone and the Burnt Ivory King are often cited alongside the very best of the entire franchises. These fights are precise, thematic and mechanically demanding in the right way. But they are surrounded by an overwhelming number of forgettable encounters. Too many bosses feel like normal enemies inflated into hell bars. The sheer quantity dilutes impacts. Instead of anticipation, players feel fatigue. The highs are extremely high, but the average is noticeably lower. Narratively, Dark Souls 2 is arguably the bleakest entry in the entire series. It strips away the illusion of heroism entirely. You are not chosen, you are not special. You are simply the next bearer of curse that has consumed countless others. King fall, queen manipulates, the throne sits empty. There is no victory, only continuation. For some, this is profound, the most honest soul story ever told. But for others, it lacks the mythical clarity and the focus of Dark Souls 1, or the apocalyptic finality of Dark Souls 3. Its themes are strong but diffuse, powerful ideas scattered across too many kingdoms, too many rulers, too many metaphors. And yet, despite all the criticism, history has been kind to Dark Souls 2. In a crucial way, it influenced many of the most controversial ideas would later resurface, refined and celebrated in the Elden Ring. Power stancing returned as a core mechanic, build diversity explode, hybrid casting flourish, and open-ended exploration became a norm. Medulla's branching structure echoes in the lands between. Dark Souls 2 has the laboratory from FromSoftware tested ideas that would later define its greatest success. That doesn't erase its flaws, but reframes them. Dark Souls 2 is not hated because it's bad in isolation. It is hated because it sits at the crossroads between tradition and experimentation. It breaks rules before players were ready to see them broken. It asks for patience when players expect familiarity. It sacrifices cohesion for ambition. So the question is here, is Dark Souls 2 a true misunderstood masterpiece or a deep flawed sequel? Well, the answer is it is both. It is a game that reaches higher than it consistently succeeds. A game whose failures are visible and whose triumphs are undeniable. and games that feel less polished than its siblings, yet more daring than either. And whatever you love it or despise it, often say less about the game itself and more about what you believe what a Souls game should be. So that's Dark Souls 2, a game that reaches higher than its consistently succeed, a game whose flaws are impossible to ignore, but most ambitious still echoes through the rest of the series itself. Whether you see it as a misunderstood masterpiece or a deep flawed sequel, probably say less about the game itself, but more about what you believe what a Souls game should be. I'm genuinely curious where you stand. Do you think Dark Souls 2 deserves its reputation? Or do you think history has been too harsh on it? Let me know in the comments down below. I personally read them all. If you enjoyed this long discussion, make sure you like the video. It really helps the channel. Subscribe yourself to the channel itself, Ashen, for more deep dives, essays and conversation about the games we all love. And sometimes love to argue about it. Once again, thank you for watching. Merci infiniment. Merci beaucoup. And hopefully I can see you all on the next one or during my live stream on Twitch itself. You always can find me under Ashen NK itself. Take care. For any additional questions, of course, we have an open Discord. Come and say hi. And I'll see you guys on the next one, man. Take care. One love. One all of you, man. Peace.